First of all, my name is Tony Scullambrini, and I am the current chair of school committee for the town of Lunenburg. This is our fourth forum on the 2025 budget surplus, and so the hope is that we can answer any questions anybody has. Dr. Fortuna and I, along with Chris, have done this song and dance multiple times in front of multiple audiences. I don't know if there will be topics that we haven't heard, because we've heard lots of crazy topics. The information is going to be basically the same that we presented. We did one forum at school committee where it was like the topic right after the town meeting, where it was clear that people had questions. So we'd set aside time for that. Unfortunately, nobody showed up. The other two we did at school, and we did have people show up. They were all school employees and staff who were equally outraged. The hope is that if we can't answer your questions tonight, we'll be able to understand what the questions are and get you an answer directly. I don't want any questions to go unanswered. I think it's important for us to do that, especially if we are going to ask the public for another override. I think it's hard to avoid the optics of the override and then the budget surplus issue not being tied together. And I think that hopefully once we explain what happened, people will have a better understanding. Laura, if you want to introduce yourself. I think everybody knows who we are. It's kind of pretty
Hi,
formal.
Laura Brzozowski. I know all you guys. Yeah, welcome, and it is really good to see people here participating and having questions. That is excellent. So thank you for coming.
So before we open up to questions, let's just give like a brief overview, and Chris and Dr. Fortuna, you can jump in. The school district typically ran, over the last couple of years, about a decade, they've run a surplus of somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000. When the surplus is unspent and the fiscal year ends, the money, it is an account by the town, and then the town swipes the account, takes the money, and it returns back to general spending, the general account. No money was ever lost, no money was ever misplaced. In this case, the budget surplus ended up being somewhere around, and Chris, you probably have the exact numbers?
$556,000.
So $556,000. There are basically like 4 or 5 large reasons and then a bunch of little small reasons. The basic problem was the previous business manager was not doing line item transfers to address unspent money in the way that she should have, and the superintendent implemented austerity measures thinking that we had less money than we did. So that's, if somebody asked me like, how did this happen, that's how it happened. The specifics really involve, like I said, 3 or 4 big pots of money and some smaller pots of money. The largest amount of money that we had in terms of the surplus came from the allocation of a competitive grant. So we submitted a grant for paraprofessionals in the school district. It was 200 and, how much was the grant, the total value of the grant?
I believe it was between $400,000 and $500,000.
Yeah, so we asked for this competitive grant. In budgeting, the way that the school district works is that we will ask for a competitive grant. If it's something that we need, we will also budget for it. And if you get the competitive grant, the ideal accounting practice would be to go back and reallocate the money that had previously been budgeted for that item once the competitive grant was awarded. In this case, we did not do that, and that's why there was such a large surplus. There was also a surplus around the utilities. It was, again, something that should have been caught. If it had been caught, it would have been very easy to spend the money. Not only did we implement austerity measures thinking that we had less money than we did, but there is a pretty short and easily obtainable list of things that are priority spending items. So for example, the elementary school, the primary school, they use these things called TouchView. If you've gone to the school, you've seen them. They look like giant flat screen TVs, but what they really are is like giant iPads. So there's screens that are also touch sensitive so you can interact with them. And they have found that they have been really useful. There are classrooms in the primary school that have been waiting for touch view screens for a long time. Easy way for us to take the money that we had allocated for paras. We could have done a line item transfer, used that money to purchase the touch view, and that would have spent down the surplus. It was something that we needed. It was something that Principal Squire asked for. She had provided documentation, and at the end of the day, when Dr. Burnham implemented austerity measures, it fell short of what we chose to fund. Had we known that there was this money out there in the surplus, we could have easily had whoever was in Chris's position come before us and say, I'd like to make a line item transfer from the para line that we used and were awarded a competitive grant for to this spending line for the touch view screens as an example. And we could have spent that money. There are other things that we could have spent money on that fall short of a capital plan request. For example, we could pretty easily have spent money on making parts of Turkey Hill ADA compliant. We are currently operating under a grandfather provision in the state law that allows us to have Turkey Hill out of compliance with ADA, but we would like to try to make our school buildings as accommodating as we can to all the children, especially children that are disabled. It's important. The studies have shown that having ADA compliant facilities allows disabled children to attend school with non-disabled children, and that incurs a benefit both to disabled children and the non-disabled children. So there are and were a ton of items that we could have easily reallocated the money to had we been aware that this surplus was sitting on the books. We just didn't know. And by the time we found out, when Dr. Fortuna and Chris came in, it was too late to spend it. The last thing I'll say is, as part of the summary, is all of the people that were involved in making decisions about how the money is spent, where it was spent, and whose responsibility to have it reallocated, they are no longer employed by the school district. Dr. Burnham, who was the superintendent at the time, she retired. Dr. Gilson had found employment in a different district. And then down the line, other people that were involved have since gone on. I'm not laying the blame at anybody's feet. I'm simply saying that we have had a complete and total change of personnel for the parts of the budget that these incidences, these problems came up in. The last thing that I will say is that we have implemented a number of new measures across the district to make sure that things like this don't happen again. First of all, we made sure that our hire in the budget and business office was exceptional. I think if anybody has watched Chris at the tri-board meeting or at our meetings, it's hard to match his down to the penny memory on expenses. And my experience is when you have an accountant, that's the thing you want them to do well. The other thing that we've implemented is new measures for review of the budget. If you've noticed in our meetings, Chris will regularly update us. We are X% through the budget and we are X% through the school year. And we kind of know where expenses will lay, and so we can better plan. And then the final thing is that we have been much more careful in managing grant money. I can say that we have been much more involved on school board level of the use of grant money and how it was spent. And we've taken steps to make sure that grant money is accounted for and spent correctly.
We bring the grant money forward for pre-approval by the school committee now for anything that we want to do, so the school committee has clear lines into what we're proposing to do.
And the other thing is we also make sure that after we've approved it, that it is spent consistent with what we approved. If you look at some of the grants that the school gets, the grant language is really specific, really specific, especially the DESE grants. And so we want to be scrupulous in what we submit to DESE, and we want to be scrupulous in what we spend when we get money from DESE. So it's not just, this is what we say we're going to spend it on. We verify this is what we say we're going to spend it on, and then we check later on to see that's how it was spent. And if it's not, we have taken steps to correct those problems. So I think, we wish this would not have happened. it is really sad and tragic that this happened. There are measurable impacts from this happening. And Mr. Abbott, I think you said you have the MCAS results. You can look at the MCAS results and see places where we pulled back as part of austerity measures with the MTSS and the IEP support, and it bore out in the data. And to be charged and have a fiduciary duty to schools, children, and student achievement, and see that the austerity measures that we thought were necessary turned out not to be necessary and had a measurable impact on little kids is sort of the nightmare. Like, I could volunteer and Laura could volunteer and do something way different than this. We choose to do this because it matters to us. And so when we see that the things that we did not only were not necessary, but hurt the kids we have a duty to protect, it's deeply troubling. I mean, I'm taking time off of my day right now to be here because I think this is incredibly important. And so with all of that said, having put that out as a summary, I'm happy to answer questions. I know everybody else is happy to answer questions as well.
Can I add?
Sure.
I want to say, and not necessarily for you guys here, because I think you all understand it, it is typical to have a surplus in a municipal budget. The other departments in the town also return surpluses. A deficit would be a problem. It is typical to have a surplus. We have a surplus, which Tony and Dr. Fortuna have said is typically between $100,000 and $200,000. Dr. Fortuna would like us through our new very careful budgeting to get that down even. But it is typical. Other town departments all had a surplus this year. Ours was just more than we would like, more than was necessary. It was 2.2% of our total budget. And yeah, like Tony, there is not one specific place that we didn't spend money. If you look at what we didn't expend money on in the supply lines, and the expense lines, it was everywhere. The teachers were told we're in austerity measures, we are on a budget freeze, don't buy anything, and that is what our staff did. The principals had a tight control of their budget as they were asked to, and a lot of many little things and larger things simply did not get purchased to the detriment of our students and staff. We asked the staff to do a lot with very little. For example, library books, the expense line for library books was not touched. That was all a surplus, even though we should have been buying books. There was a freeze, and so staff responded as they were asked. So it really, all those little bits and pieces really added up.
One last thing Laura reminded me of, and I want to thank Mr. Menard. There was another thing that we did to implement changes that would help with the surplus. So at last town meeting, we asked for a special stabilization account for out-of-district expenditures. One of the things that shocks our budget more than just about anything is if a child who cannot be educated in district moves into town after a certain date in the calendar. We have an obligation to pay 100% of the out-of-district costs that first year, hoping that we will get paid back the following year. And so the out-of-district costs that we have seen, not only have they gone up because of state giving out-of-district placements the ability to raise their costs more than they have in the past, but the number of kids that are receiving out-of-district placements varies, and it's going up. In my experience on school committee in this town, they've ranged from $254,000 a year to, I think we had one that was in excess of $800,000 a year. When we have a budget surplus, the town is now empowered at town meeting to take our surplus and place it in this stabilization account. So it's yet another measure to make sure we capture the money and we put it in a place where if we need it, we can use it. Still under the protection of it has to go through town meeting. People have to see it, they have to hear why we need it, and the only way we can get it is through that process. So
It's not a blank check where
It's not a
we
blank
can
check.
simply over budget and then take the money and put it into that surplus account.
Yeah.
It's
it's
beholden to the
an
vote of
educational
town
spare
meeting.
tire, right? Like we needed this spare tire. We did not have one for a long time, and unfortunately for us, these spare tires are incredibly expensive. I mean, some of them, like I said, the $800,000 placement is right down the road in Worcester, and it is essentially a full-time hospital and a full-time school. I mean, they have more people attending to the children than there are children. It's not like, you know, a 25-to-1 student-to-teacher ratio. It's actually reversed. It's, you know, you have 3 medical personnel and 3 educators and 1 child. So it is exceptionally expensive, and until we had this special stabilization fund, which was the brainchild of Laura and Mr. Bernard at the same time, we would not have had this outlet or resource, and it gives us yet another way to make sure that we're not wasting anybody's money.
And the beauty of it is town meeting has to appropriate the money into this account for us. So we established the account at the special town meeting in the fall. If there's any appropriations that go into this fund, town meeting needs to approve that. So it does remain with the citizens to be able to do that. Can I address probably what an elephant in the room is?
Sure.
I think the community has been hearing for many years that the schools need and are in this desperate situation. I, through my analysis, have not seen prior to this year that the schools were in fact in that level of desperation because of the early austerity measures that were put into place. This year was the year that we made cuts. This is when we're starting to see the pain points. If you listen to school committee tonight, you're going to hear in my report that because of the cuts that we made in special education services, we now have several children that we may be looking at out-of-district placements for because we cannot provide them free and appropriate public education in the Lunenburg public schools anymore. And I think that having this discussion about what we would have added, those things are important. They're important to our students' learning. They're important to give them the education that they need. This year, for example, we're funding the TouchView screens through a grant funding, and that's what our new philosophy moving forward with grants is to plug holes in the operational budget with much more oversight from the school committee. But I want to be open about that because I do think it is an elephant in the room as we're going to be saying the same thing this year. I am really, really concerned about FY27 for the schools. And I know that for many of the citizens and voters, and rightfully so, the FY25 issue is of concern because it was also an override year. So how can we say that we needed more and then give back over 50% of what the override amount was for? And I think we have much stricter lines. For example, there was a mistake in the FY26 budget, which again wasn't formulated by Chris or I. We're doing the FY27 one right now, but there was a mistake in that budget that was fairly substantial that we caught because we are monitoring our budget so closely, and we were able to do a line item transfer to account for that error. So I want to assure the community that A, we are diligently informing the school committee more. So as your representatives, they have the information that they need. I am not sure that they've had that in prior years as explicitly as we're doing it now. I also want to assure the community that Chris and I meet almost daily about where we are with our current spending, and Chris loves it when I give him a call and say, come on over. It's his favorite time of day. But we do communicate frequently about the budget. He checks me a lot, which is really good. I check him, and so we are putting in a system of checks and balances that did not exist in FY '25. So that is really important. I think to further expound on something that Mr. Scolambrini said, we are a different team. There is a totally new central office team in town right now. And we realize that we're asking you to trust us, yet you don't really know us yet. And based on past practice, you have rights to really question what's happening. So I want to appreciate the grace that you extend to us. I want to acknowledge that grace. I want to continue asking for that grace as we move into the new budget season. I know we're here to answer questions about FY '25, but I think without answering these questions, we cannot move forward to FY '27. So, questions?
It'd be better if we use the mic just for the video. Yeah, well, thank you. Not to excuse me, and the bad accent.
Darrell Plant. On the ARPA, on the shortfalls that most of these communities have experienced over the last year, well, 2 years now, a lot of people have associated that with the fact that these school districts at that time were using those extra monies, the ARPA monies and emergency relief fund monies, to hire new employees. Okay, they were, and in those funds, these districts were directed not to do that. They were told it was supposed to be capital expenses. Am I incorrect in saying that this is in large part why we're in the place we're at right now, where we've had to lay a lot of people off, that we took a lot of people on during that period of time, and we really shouldn't have?
The ARPA funds were used for a variety of things.
Yep.
There were some things that we used where we knew that the people that we were hiring were not long-term solutions. So there were programs that we needed to implement, like for example, one of the things that became very expensive was contact tracing. I don't want to put everybody back into that nightmare, but we did hire people for that, and that's just something that we had to do. The majority of the problem that we are facing is that the rate of inflation outstrips the tax rate that is allowable under state law. That is the majority of the problem. It is the problem for the town, it's a problem for the school district. The ARPA funds sunsetting were something that we had anticipated. None of the things that we had to cut when we implemented austerity measures were related to ARPA sunsetting, because I think the timing for the ARPA sunsetting was about a year off. But the bigger issue is we are faced with not hyperinflation, but steady inflation that regularly outstrips what we can raise.
2.5%.
Yeah, what we can outraise for tax revenue. And if your costs are staying the same or going up because you're buying the same thing, but it's now 3.5% or 4.5% or 5% more expensive, but the revenue that you can generate is only 2.5%, then you're going to always be stuck. If you look at one of the things that I did when we were on the budget task force is I laid out year-over-year spending and included the chart for inflation from the U.S. government over, I think, the last 6 years or 7 years. The difference ended up being, if you give me a second, can I have a second? And I'll call it up so I can give you the exact answer. I just want to make sure I get it right.
Which one are you looking for?
The Budget Task Force Executive Summary is the document.
Can I add to that? for a
Sure.
second? There were, I believe, 2 or 3 positions. So during the 2024 FY25 override, when we were talking about the budget, the non-override budget, and I believe the override budget, there were some positions that were supposed to be temporary. I believe it was 2 or 3 that were supposed to be temporary that we had added in to address COVID learning loss, and then found those positions to be so helpful that we did keep those positions and then get rid of different positions, because Dr. Burnham felt those positions were helping addressing children in danger of falling below where they should be, below their benchmarks. So we did keep positions that were originally supposed to be temporary, and I believe 2 or 3 positions, and those were MTSS and tutor positions, because the ESSER money went away, but the COVID learning loss was still there, but the money to help with it was gone. So
And
we,
we've cut those positions now.
and those positions have since been cut, and we are feeling the effects of that.
So, Mr. Plant, to answer your question, from 2020 to 2023, inflation went up 18.05%. And if you had max taxation rates on each of those years, you would be 8.05% behind. So the costs are going up, but the amount of money coming into the system is staying the same. That's fundamentally the problem. And it's the problem with all the towns. The ARPA money offered a reprieve for a minute or two, but it was never something that we counted on for long-term budgeting.
Okay. Going back to the grant discussion,
Yes.
is the grants, you apply for a certain amount of grants every year, I assume,
A lot.
As many as we can.
as many as you can. And I would expect that you have an expectation of some sort, what you think you might get back,
Yes, sir.
you know.
That's right.
Is that included in your budgeting overall? In other words, you outlined initially how you did your budgeting, where you came in, you had a surplus of 100 grand, that 100 grand would have a place to go inside the school. If this were to happen again, 500 or 600, that's a lot. I'm not saying it would happen again. But is that being transparent to the town in terms of what your expectation is? You submit a budget, the town votes on it. Is there any side note saying, our expectation is to receive this X amount of money through grants?
Yeah, so
But
if
we
you-
haven't been, we won't know yet.
Yeah.
Our most predictable grants are our federal entitlement grants. They're called Title I, Title II, and Title IV. Title I is intended to serve low-income students. Title II is professional development, and Title IV is for student mental health and a safe learning environment. The problem this year with budgeting for it this year, and I agree that it should be transparent and upfront, is that we don't know at the federal level what's happening with those grants. I am assuming, the budget assumption that I am making right now is that we will not have Title II and Title IV available to us. And we just heard from the state yesterday, which we can include in the budget, that we can expect a 30% cut to Title I. So that is hot off the press news that came from a meeting that we had with DESE yesterday, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So now that we have that figure, we can include it in the budget as a budget assumption.
Can I add? So last year, we actually went back and revised the budget based on what we were hearing out of Washington and the likelihood of the budget of those grants coming through, because it is a lot harder to make the same assumptions we could in the past, but there was a level, it was included in budgeting, but right now, it would be best if we didn't rely entirely on the numbers we had seen before.
Can I, just give you a little bit of, if you watch the meetings for the school committee, when we were doing grant applications, there was always this is an entitlement grant, this is a competitive grant. Anya would do, Ms. Scott would do this. She would talk to us about, this is a competitive grant, we have won this in the past, this is something that we're looking forward to. And so there is some, Kreskin going on where we're trying to predict. We do keep track of the ones that we typically have won in the past. And when they're presenting the grants, they have always made sure to let us know, this is one we've won in the past, So, we're not relying on it, but we're fairly confident we'll get this. And you can go through and watch them. There's ones like the one that we were recently awarded that was, what was the one that we were dealing with?
The earmark grant?
The earmark grants,
I forget what it was called.
or the
The one where I read the grant language and like, I don't know what any of this means.
Oh, yeah,
oh, which one was that?
the special,
So we received a
Curriculum
grant from the state, which was part of a continuing grant project, and we had won the first part of the grant, and we were hoping they would give us the second part of the grant. So again, we knew we had some, it wasn't just a blind crapshoot that we were gonna get the money, because we had gotten the money for phase one, and phase two built on phase one, and so we do try to have that kind of guesswork going on. Obviously, you can't count on it, but you can keep it in mind. The big problem for us was when we got the competitive grant for the paras, we did not go back and reallocate the funds that were already budgeted. That is the problem. It is unquestionably a mistake. There is no way to get around the fact that it was just an abject failure of basic accounting. We transfer money, and you, Mr. Plant, I've been happy to see you at many school committees meetings. You've seen us do these transfers all the time. It is not complicated. It is not unusual. I want to emphasize to everyone how often we do this. Like, Chris will come to us and be like, we have $1,100 in our yellow marker fund for primary school that we would like to transfer to our green marker fund for Turkey Hill. And that's just making that up. But we do that kind of transfer all the time. So the fact that this was not brought to the school committee's attention and this basic transfer was not made after the grant was won, that is the largest contributor why there was a surplus.
and that it was not discovered
Until
until
afterwards.
after the fiscal year ended and we could not make adjustments. Also, so the grants, it's ideally, we're not spending the grants on salaries.
Correct.
On positions, so that if a grant does not come through, we're not laying off people. The grants would be extras and enhancements on what we're currently doing, so that if a grant does not come through, okay, well, that stinks, but we're not scrambling and we're not having to lay people off because we found out mid-year we were not awarded a grant. That would be bad budgeting.
In our FY27 budget, we will have fully removed anybody that was being paid through an entitlement grant. Grants should be used for one-time funds because you never know what's going to happen. So they should be used for one-time funds. That always hasn't been the case here, but it is the case moving forward.
One final question. Deals with your, the account that you'd like to establish,
The special reserve,
special
It
reserve?
is already done. It was voted on at town meeting.
Correct.
it's not
Yeah.
funded,
No,
It's
no,
not
it's not funded.
it's empty.
It's
So,
existing, but
this
it's
is
not funded.
actually a very quick and easy question. So those monies that, if you do get monies put into that account at the next town meeting, what will you be, the line item in your budget for those expenses, which is around 2 million, I think?
Yeah.
That doesn't disappear. You keep that line item in place. That's what you expect to spend. If you get whatever money's put into that account,
Yeah.
that's a backstop.
So what would happen is, the problem that gave rise to the need for the special stabilization fund is, there is a time period between when our budget is submitted and when our liability is open that is different. So if somebody moves in the time period between our budget closing and when our liability for out-of-district placement costs closes, we are obligated to pay it, but we have not budgeted for
And
it.
it's a big
Well, I
window.
understand that, but
Yeah.
you've only been doing that for 20 years.
Yes, it is a backstop.
Right?
Yeah.
You
And that's
are
all it is. So that line
absolutely
item, do you expect that line item, do you expect it to carry over to the following year to be around 2 million? I mean, depending on how you end up this
Well,
year.
it can only be a certain percent of
Yeah.
Yep.
the surplus. It can only be a certain percent of the surplus that you can roll into the account.
But we do anticipate that that line item will continue in our operating budget because we know who we have that is currently out of district and we anticipate some move-ins. So
Yeah,
the likelihood of using the stabilization account would only be realized if we had an extraordinary number of students move in where we had expended that line item already.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for your question.
Karen Menard, 672 Page Street. I do not like flying off the seat of my pants with my comments, so bear with me for a few minutes. First, I want a little bit of clarification. We're not talking about ARPA funds, we're talking about ESSER funds, correct? Okay, so I want to circle back to Mr. Plant. I don't know if he was leaving or coming back, but he had made the comment in there that the school district had been told that they should not be using ESSER funds for salaries. And that question didn't fully get answered. I know the answer to it, which is absolutely it was used towards salaries. So I want to make sure that's crystal clear to people, number one. His other question had to do with grants and what would happen, and I know that Dr. Fortuna had mentioned it in the beginning, that sometimes if there's a need for something, you'll put it in your budget and you'll apply for the grant for it. I want to fully understand, and I think this was Mr. Plant's question, where the transparency is in how that gets expended if you get the grant. Say you get a $400,000 grant. Now you have $400,000 worth of, I want this money in there. And we can't operate off of wants anymore. We have to operate off of true needs in this community. How are we making sure that that has been exposed to the community who voted for this at town meeting, who voted for a $400,000 line item in your budget because that's what we thought it was going to be expended on, only to have that $400,000 come back in a grant? Where's the transparency here? What am I missing in the pieces of
So
this?
for example, the grant that I was referring to that was like the second phase, that was something that was presented to us at school committee when they made the proposal for the grant. And then after the grant was awarded, there was a second proposal, or a second presentation that said, we got this money, and here's what we plan on spending it. Like, obviously, that's the ideal, right? They say to us, we're gonna go ask for it, and then they come back and say, we got it, here's where it is. And then, the next step is, did we budget for this? And if we budgeted for this, how are we reallocating the money? So like, I can tell you, like, that is the archetypical way we'd like to see that done. I can't tell you that that's always been the way it was done. I've only been on school committee for 5 years, but the people that are applying for the grants, it's a relatively small group of people within the school district, and, they are keeping us apprised. And then, in the past, when we have gotten grant money, we have moved things around in response to having less budget pressure on that specific line. But, I have no idea why it did not happen in this case.
I guess I'm more concerned about how the general public, the people that went to town meeting, that sat through not a couple of hours worth of town meeting, sat through 6+ hours of town meeting, year after year, I understand how the process works with the school committee. I understand that it's in your purview to be able to do this. I want to be clear on that. I do understand that. But to me, that was asking me for a vote at town meeting to support a budget that could potentially be giving you a whole lot of pocket money to do what you want with. And while that's nice, what you want and what you need are two different things. Sure. And the folks at town meeting are, most of them, from what I have figured out over the last 20+ years of attending town meeting, they're looking to see what the town needs. The wants are extras. We'd love to have everything. I would love to have a full-time Parks and Rec director. I'd love to be able to open the town beach to everybody. The reality is we can't do that right now. So we're making sacrifices, and we're being very transparent with the town and how we're doing that. This just doesn't seem to be as transparent. And as you're going forward, just think about that if you're double line iteming something because you've applied for a grant, you're hoping to get a grant, but you've also put that in your budget as a safeguard in case you don't get that grant. It would be nice to know that that's happening when discussions are happening.
We're discontinuing that practice, Mrs. Menard.
You can call me Karen. Ms. Menard is my name. Somebody tried to call me Madam Chair multiple times yesterday. That does not go over well with me. She is absolutely guilty. But and my last thing is, and Jody and Chris, thank you for jumping into the fire. This is not directed at you in any way. I know Laura and I have had this discussion before, but I do want to make it public. While we have new administration in this school system, and we have new staff across the board, there are many members of the previous school committee that are still floating around on other boards. Things that happened last year that should never, ever have happened were happened under the people that are still serving our community. That is not lost on me. I do not like to throw arrows at anybody who serves our community. That is not the purpose of this comment. But when I have a husband who gives an incredible amount of time to the Finance Committee as their chair, who stepped into that position at a time when he least expected it, literally didn't even expect it. We left on vacation, we came home on a Sunday. Guess what? There's no Finance Committee chair anymore. Chris stepped into it that following week. When he asks for documents and he doesn't get them, and we find out months later that those documents were available and were purposely kept from your Finance Committee chair, that can never, ever be allowed to happen again. Because we, as a community, the people that are sitting here, most of the faces that are sitting here are some of the more active people in town. When we ask for something, we're not trying to be a thorn in the side. We're asking because something doesn't make sense, or we want to make sure we're understanding it right, or the numbers come out right. And I'm going to guarantee you right now, if that information had been released as requested back in the spring, there is at least one member of this Finance Committee, this current Finance Committee, that would have most likely have caught the mistake. That is alarming to me. So we cannot ever let that happen under anybody's tenure. If somebody asks for something and they don't get it, and members of the public go to their elected officials to say, we haven't gotten this information, you can't automatically side with somebody else. You've got to figure out why they didn't get that information. We cannot let this happen again. So, thank you.
If we have the document, we will provide it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Chris Menard, 672 Page Street, also the Finance Committee Chair. I guess two things. One, you have outlined steps that you've taken to kind of fix things, but they're kind of like just happening as far as I can tell. Are you putting systems, processes, and procedures in place to make sure that it lives beyond the personalities that are enabling it to happen and actually institutionalizes what is necessary there?
The answer is yes. I'm sorry? So one of the things that we're doing is we're having Chris give us a regular update as part of school committee.
Monthly.
Here's where we are, here's how much we have. We asked him to do that as part of his routine presentation. It was not something that was done under the previous two business managers. The other thing that we have done is that we have gone through the process as I described with the grants, where we're looking closely at the grants and making sure that the grants not only apply for things correctly, but then once we get the money, put the money into place in a correct way. And then the last thing that I can think of has to do with the money that we are allocated from the state. We are trying to make sure that our asks for them are very targeted and focused, and that we spend them on the things that we need. So all of those things are recent changes to procedures that we have at the school committee that I think will give us better insights. I think, like if anybody has things that they're like, you guys should really do this. This is what we do for healthy business. The last thing I want to answer, and this is something that we have in our budget, I think it's just really safe and good in terms of accounting practices to have somebody that assists Chris. We have put a lot on his shoulders, and we have operated with one person in the business office and like part of another person someplace else. In addition to just having like another set of eyes, it means that like Chris can go on vacation and we will not fall apart, or things will not slip through the cracks. So that would be the last thing that I think that we would want to do to put into place, so that we have structures and not people that will ensure fidelity to the budget.
Once we are through with this budget season, we will memorialize this in a budgeting handbook.
Okay. Yeah, we have policies and procedures on that.
Yeah.
And then I would also implore, and this not only goes, I think, for the school, but for the town in general, our data systems are really bad. And one of the things that we've seen through the 3 or 4 facilities managers that have kind of gone through the school is everything's written on paper. I think they shred the paper on their way out, for all I can tell. And then it's like this, well, we gotta go back through every school again and find out all the problems. Documentation that kind of comes between boards is just emailed, and there's no repository for this stuff. So I do think we should really look at our IT systems and how we manage data. We probably should put systems in place for approvals that are archived along the way on things. I'm drawing a blank on the name of that, but, so that would, one outshoot of all of this is like, let's find ways to kind of archive data properly. To a previous question on what has been presented to at least Finance Committee, and I won't put it on what's presented to Finance Committee because I think that's an actual snapshot in time that represents a finalized budget and everything that went into making that budget. When Mr. Cassidy left, we no longer even really got presentations. We never really even got PowerPoint presentations, anything. There was a lot of words used in meetings. There were maybe emails. There were massive incorrect Google Docs, not even Excel, that kind of went through. So my expectation on the presentations that are given to Finance Committee that memorialize the decisions that you're trying to get us to budget off of are going to be back to what they used to be. So assumptions on grants should be in there. Staffing projections should be in there. Staff and rationale on those projections should be in there. Deviations from the prior year's staffing plan should be in there. So we just got to get back to kind of better mechanisms that we're dealing with. And I know we were kind of in a difficult time with respect to Mr. Cassidy leaving and a superintendent who probably is not an accounting major trying to bring things on, but that has to be, something of the past, so.
Just so you know, Mr. Bernard, I want to make sure. It wasn't like we were getting great stuff and we sent you garbage. We got garbage too. We were just getting garbage all around. I mean, there were a couple of meetings where we got stuff added to our folder like the day of or
At 5:45 PM.
or basic math. Like I remember Laura having a long argument about how 6 is smaller than 7 with the person that was in the business office. It was just it was a hassle. It was a disaster, and
Yeah, I tend to be more forward-looking in my approach to things and don't harp on the past, but I do say that you need to learn from the past and get back to those best practices. So I just want to make that as an expectation that in things like revolving accounts, we want to know the revolving accounts. We want to know the grants and what goes into those grants and that sort of thing. And then we got to get back again towards, maybe now that we have a finance director on the town side, these quarterly reports to the Finance Committee. We don't need them monthly or anything like that, but we do probably need those quarterly reports to be scheduled. And I know we're all working hard and there's a lot going on, but those would be recommendations for that.
I do want to say that I think it's important to keep in mind that as a school system, we have to be a little bit adaptable and flexible in our budgeting. And I know that the Finance Committee, especially people who like the Finance Committee, like a very set budget and for us to stick to that budget. But we are educating children and in a changing population, and the budget does change throughout the year. We're not going to stick to it 100%. We're not going to say we're going to spend $120,000 on heat this year, and then if it's warmer, we're going to make adjustments. We can't say definitively even this is the number of paraprofessionals we need next year, because a new kindergarten class comes in every single year, and the needs of the school change. And we went through that just this year where we thought we had an adequate number of paraprofessionals to deal with the load. And would you say we did?
Yeah, we have two of the most expensive paraprofessionals in the state, the principal and the assistant principal,
Yeah.
acting as paraprofessionals
We're-
because we have a need.
Yeah, right now, the principal and the vice principal are acting as paraprofessionals to fill a need, because it is not something that we can just say, we will get to it when we can afford it, we will get to it when there's room in the budget. No, we need them right now to deal with the child in front of us and their needs immediately, because that's the most important thing, is our students' safety.
Yeah, so part of a briefing that happens every 3 months or so can outline the budget change requests that were made and the rationale for them, so that there's transparency in what is occurring.
Yeah, we can totally do
I
that.
don't think that is not unreasonable in
Yes,
any way.
please.
So, just a little follow-up. Budgets change, but I think, like you said, just the transparency, there has to be, I think that's what me and Dr. Fortuna have tried to do since we started, is just being transparent about it. Just to talk a little bit about FY '25, I think, just from an accounting standpoint and auditing standpoint, looking at it, that they weren't as aggressive as they should have been. There were line items, like Laura said earlier, in workbooks, I believe it was $11,000, just unspent. So far this year, because I just looked at it, we're 56.2% expended. We are, which I think leaves us in a good place right now, because one of the things that just came up is increase in special education costs that are coming. And our server just went down the other day, so we had to buy a new server. So that was pretty expensive. But I think I'm more than welcome to come to quarterly meetings and present anything you want.
Okay, and we can work through what that looks like on both the town side and the finance side. And I also want to say, like, having an underrun is a good thing, right? But having an underrun and not understanding that you're going to have an underrun is really, I think, what the problem is.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Thank you, Mr. Menard, for that. That clarifies it perfectly. It wasn't a bad thing. We didn't lose money. Money was not lost. Money was not misappropriated.
there are
I want
other
to say that
towns.
really, really loudly. So having an underrun isn't a bad thing. Not knowing you're gonna have an underrun is a very bad thing. And that shows that we need to have the level of oversight that we're providing now, which it takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of work, and it could be the reason that we're slow right now in responding to some requests, because it's really Chris that is doing and able to do the work, and he's busy building out, watching the FY '26 budget to make sure what happened in FY '25 doesn't happen again, and he's building out the budget scenarios for FY '27. And that takes an extensive amount of work. But what you just said was perfectly stated. It's not a bad thing that happened. We did not lose the taxpayers' money. That money is going to be returned to the town, and when we appropriate free cash in May, then you will see that money, you will be able to see that money come back to the town.
Or it stayed with the town.
Yes.
Yeah. I actually was gonna ask, can I ask the town manager a question? Can you? Oh, sure. I don't mean to, so if I were a member of the public, my question would be, where is that $500,000? Where is it? And what happened to it? Did it just disappear? Did it go away? Where's the money and where is it going to go?
So thank you for that. So Jennifer Warren Diamond, Town Manager. Before I answer the question, I just first want to really thank the superintendent, the business manager, and the school committee for coming together in this forum tonight or this afternoon. I think that you have done an incredible effort in trying to be transparent around this issue right from the beginning and trying to get the message out. And I think that sometimes we heard at town meeting that not all people are tuned in, so hopefully those that aren't here in this room are going to watch this. Like any other departmental budget, at the end of the year, at the end of any fiscal year, any monies that are unexpended from any operating budget, coupled with any revenues that came in over and above what we had anticipated. So local receipts, for example, motor vehicle excise tax came in higher. All of those either unexpended monies or revenues that came in higher, at the end of the year, what we do is we go through the closeout process. And once we close out all of the accounts and reconcile all of that, it gets submitted to the state, who then any of those overages will come back as certified free cash. So it doesn't get retained in your operating budget for those who think that, oh, they had extra money and it can just go from FY25 to FY26. It does not. It doesn't go away. It just goes into a different pot. And that different pot is certified free cash. To the point of where that certified free cash figure is now, if folks have not tuned in to last night's select board meeting, in my town manager's report, I gave a lot of information about where the FY25 closeout was for the town. And, you know, not dissimilarly from what the school department encountered in the summer this year, is we are encountering our own problems on the town side with errors and things that weren't reconciled and things that are done, and we are quite delayed in getting those balance sheets and Schedule A over to the Division of Local Services so that we can have free cash certified. But those funds, that 540,000 and change was, I'm so sorry, 556, those will be included ultimately in the certified free cash, minus anything that sometimes when we're in that process, there's deficiencies in accounts that get covered, but the net of it will be included in that certified free cash.
And what do we do with free cash? Is it just free cash we can spend on anything, or do we have uses for it?
So all free cash just essentially sits until town meeting appropriates and authorizes its use. We have some policies around free cash. 10% of whatever comes back as certified free cash automatically sweeps to our OPEB liability. We also spend, when we can, I don't know if we're going to be this year, but we put money away in our stabilization accounts, whether that be our general purpose stabilization account, our special purpose stabilization accounts. We use free cash for other one-time items, such as the snow and ice overage. It's the only budget line that we are allowed to deficiency spend, so we supplement that with free cash. And we also use it for our capital funds and other one-time projects. So it does come back directly to the town. Any unspent free cash, if we have a remaining balance, that's starting free cash for the next year. That automatically starts as a positive balance in free cash.
And there's free cash every year because every department returns.
So not every department returns money. There are some departments that are, at the end, you're borrowing from other, not every single department returns money. But there is typically excess balances, and that is normal. That like as Mr. Menard said, as you have said, it is normal to have funds return. And so there are metrics around what percentage of free cash you should have in comparison to your operating budget. We're meeting those metrics. You don't want to budget so tightly that you are not able to adjust to things that happen within the fiscal year, and also that you are not turning back some monies to free cash. I think, you know, in addition to thanking everybody tonight, I think one of the things that I think is really good that folks heard from you is that the money is not lost. And so there is no missing money. And the other thing that I just would comment back that I've heard here, perhaps, I think it's wonderful that grants are not being used for general operational funds anymore for salaries. I think what I'm hearing from folks for the school committee to consider is that when you have something that was budgeted for in operational budgets, that maybe you don't just take that and apply it to another operational budget. Maybe that you take that and apply it towards something on your capital list that otherwise would have had to go through essentially grabbing the free cash in advance before it goes through the certification process. And to fund some of those, you have some that are smaller in nature that, $25,000, but would really help to, I think, check that box.
One of the things that I would ask, and Ms. Menard, I'm going to ask you when we leave. I just like to figure out a way to have the tracking, I want to have grant corner, so every so often we just check in on the grants so that people can, even if you don't want to tune in, you could watch 5 minutes of school committee and be like, we won this grant, this is what we did, 2 weeks later, remember that grant we won? Would that work? I don't know how anybody in municipal government does this because it's so tedious and complicated to do this in a way that explains it to the public. So if anybody has any ideas.
Just as long as she doesn't call me Madam Chair anymore. So first of all, I think whenever you get a grant, that should be shouted from the rooftops.
Yeah, we do.
That is a big deal. But I'm also gonna say this to you. If I don't know about it, you haven't done a good enough job.
Okay.
So I know that's gonna sound like a weird stick to be measuring from, but between, I'm on social media, I'm around town, I talk to people all the time, I watch select board, I don't always watch school committee because I don't have kids in this district anymore. And I only have so much time. Everybody will say, well, just watch this meeting. Well, I watch so many meetings a week. Where do you want me to find another second of time? So I don't know what the answer to that is, but you should be shouting, when you get those grants. I'm not concerned about whether you get the grants and how you expend it. I'm more concerned about, and I'm not concerned about, you got a $2,000 grant and you moved that money that you had budgeted not knowing if you were getting that grant to the green marker line. That's not the stuff that I'm worried about. I'm more worried about when, a comment on the FY25 came up, and I think this is what you introduced at the beginning, if we had known, we would have spent it. That's great. I'm glad you would have spent it. I want to know where you're spending it, though. That has to be an extremely transparent, shout from the rooftops, all over the front page of the newspaper, even if somebody within the school district has to write that article so that it gets in there, something needs to go out there so that we have a heads up as a community so we can follow along with that. We do a lot of, well, didn't you know, comments when we're talking to people. Well, no, I didn't know. And I rely on my husband, I rely on other people, to fill in gaps of information that I don't have. So I'm not sure. I just don't want a situation where a school district has suddenly received a $400,000 grant and they had budgeted for it. Now it appears that there's $400,000 in cash just waiting to be blown in your pocket. That's just not, for some of us, that's 15 times our parks budget. You know what I mean? So I just want transparency there.
Chris?
So yeah, I just want to follow up on one thing. So had I been here back in 2025, and I think some people might be wondering this is, what would you have done with the $556,000? Well, if I had looked at the budget and saw that, one of the things you can do towards the end is prepay special ed tuitions. So I would have prepaid $500.
There's some things, Chris, that will always fly, right? There's some things that will always fly. Capital stuff, almost always guaranteed to fly. Special ed funding will guaranteed to fly. We're gonna have to pay for that the following year if we don't have it. So I just wanna make sure that as we're looking, if we end up in this position again, and hopefully we don't, but if there is a large sum of money that has to go back to free cash, or if it doesn't make its way back to free cash, if it's spent by the school district before it gets there, that there is an open, transparent conversation around it, especially if you're gonna be using it on big ticket items. If you're gonna try to use that $554,000 in one full swoop, that's a little bit different than the green marker line. And I just wanna make sure that that transparency is there.
And I know what you mean by if I don't know, it wasn't clear, and I agree with you. There are certain people in the community, you are definitely one of them, that act as like canaries in the coal mine. Are we doing a good job communicating? And if you don't know, and I'll tell you, I can tell you who those people are from my perspective. I reach out to Mr. Rogers on a pretty regular basis. I reach out to Miss Byrie, Julia Callahan's mom, on a pretty regular basis. I see her at Cub Scouts. I have come up to you, I think I have called you 3 or 4 times I talked to Carol Archibald. Those are people who I think that for whatever reason, and this is the beauty of a small town, they have institutional history that's not written down that's useful to have. So like, I understand and I agree with you. I'm not saying you are not the only person, but you are definitely one of those people. You are the only person that when Dr. Fortuna was hired, I said, reach out to Karen Menard. She knows more about what's going on than other people.
That scares me. I have to be honest with everybody in this room. I was told yesterday by somebody that I am one of the veterans in town now. And out of all the people serving on boards, I am one of the veterans who has that institutional knowledge. That scares me, only because I've only been in municipal government for 15 years. That, to me, there's just a gap. We need to fill that. So get volunteers, everybody working home. We need more people to step in, because I shouldn't be 15 years young in municipal government, the veteran.
But like the reason I said that to Dr. Fortuna is because I had just gotten off the phone with you about an esoteric question related to King's Kingdom and the plot lines and Brooks House. And no one knew. Because I had asked my dad, who was on the Brooks House thing, I had asked somebody in the town, Mr. Ruth, is that right? Would that be? Mm-hmm. I asked like 15 different people. I asked Michael Ray Jeffries, who's another one of those people on that short list of emeritus members that I go to. And literally no one knew, but the one thing that they said was, you should call Karen, she will know.
She also provided me the map.
See, like,
Well, that goes to the documentation
Yeah.
and the information sharing that Chris talked about. We need better documentation and interdepartmental sharing between us and the town. So I very much like that idea.
but
Well, you don't have to. It helps because the microphone lets people hear.
Tanya Dahl, 860 Mass Ave. Again, I want to thank everybody for being here. The transparency is what's going to gain the trust back from the public. It was obvious there was poor financial practices before you. It's also just as obvious that there's very good financial practices following you. So I appreciate that, so thank you very much. And I also think we need to stay away from like terms like every department has surplus and gives back. That's not true, and I don't think department heads are gonna wanna hear that. When they provide their budget, they're not gonna wanna, we're gonna say, oh, every department has surplus, and they don't. Some are spending right to the penny, and some are going under. So, but what I really wanna know, and this is kind of me as a finance person and a systems person, you say you've changed the systems, you're using systems, all of that jazz. Chris, this is probably to you, like, what actual names of systems are you using, and how does that differ from the systems that have been used in the past? Like, what reports are you pulling? What are you showing to your, the school committee? What are you and Dr. Fortuna, talking about? Like, what's the difference between what they were doing before, what you're doing now, and what's the system improvement that you're using?
I think the biggest thing is a lot of it's being done on Munis now. Before, it was being done on Google Sheets, which
it's awful. It's
I
awful.
hate to say is I'm more of an Excel person. But, I think everything's being done on Munis now.
To be fair,
Yeah.
you have access to Munis. We had difficulty getting access to Munis for a variety of reasons. So Chris has access to the tools he needs to do the job, whereas before,
So-
Google Docs is what we had.
So I can do salary projections in Munis now, which were done on Google Sheets and Excel before, but I think, just using all the functionalities of Munis, it's such a big product that I don't know all the intricacies of it yet, but it's probably one of the best accounting softwares that I've used. So I've used QuickBooks, Sage Accounting, ProSystem Engagement, and it's probably the best that I've used.
I agree. And I think the public also needs to know that you're using this system now that you weren't using before, and it's giving you a more granular look at your budget, and you're better able to make decisions based on that. So, you can say, these things were done before, this is how we're using the system now. And, you know, Dr. Fortuna, you know, please trust us, this won't happen again. But we heard, you know, civic engagement and residents hear that all the time, but you have these concrete answers to back up what you're saying so that residents know the difference between we use systems and we, you know, yep.
So one thing that I also want to make clear, and I think this is a big deal for the accounting side of the house, prior to Chris taking over, we had a really idiosyncratic chart of accounts. He's since converted our chart of accounts to the DESI standard chart of accounts, and that has made everything make more sense. I mean, one of the things that we had looked at the Budget Task Force was the town's chart of accounts and the school's chart of accounts, and it was bananas. Like, you know, like I look at my chart of accounts for my law firm, and I know exactly what we don't have anywhere near as many entries, but just having a standardized chart of accounts and using Munis, it's sad to say, but that is a huge upgrade in systems that we should have done a long time ago. And, you know, the rainbow colored budget charts should have been a warning sign that this was not working. So like, I totally agree with
And the
everything
public
you're
need to
saying.
know that you are using updated system to get data that's more true to numbers and.
The DESI,
And the town also, it was a lot of effort on the town side to update Munis and,
I mean, I think residents need to know, I've only been here for a few years, I moved back here after a long time, that the implementation of the new city manager, as well as people here in the school system, new people on city council, town council, new people on finance, like, it's all coming together in a new way. So it's different, everything's different. Chris is asking for more and different things. You know, we're helping him, you know, kind of gather that and do things earlier so we have better sense of budget. We're asking for things earlier and you guys are giving them. So I think that the town needs to really look at the trust and know that there's huge implementation of systems, people that are knowledgeable, people that have come from places where they've done this before. So, you know, I want to back you and all the other, you know, committees and, I don't know, committees, town council, all that it has changed in the 3 years that I've been here. And even more so in the year, you know, this past year. So I think it's important to let the town know, you're updating systems, you're using systems, you have people in place that know things, and you have a town manager in place that's working with school committee, finance committee.
cooperation has also been fantastic. So thank you to our town manager and thank you to Dr. Fortuna, the cooperation.
And there is a toolkit to measure grants, if you want information, where people can kind of look and see where your grant process is. A lot of cities and towns use it, but there's lots of ways, but you need administrative folks to put the information in. So that's where you have to, where you come short. There's systems you can use, but you have to understand administratively, you have to have people to input the information into the systems, but.
Mr. Rabb?
First of all, John Rabbit, 314 Townsend Harbor Road. Thank you very much, and I dearly appreciate this conference that you're sharing. What got me here and what got me started was the fact that I went over and read my favorite ledger, and I came across an article that says Level Services School Budget, and the discussion highlighted the recent reading scores among third graders, which revealed that more than half the students were not reading. And for me, that was a big shock, because I always thought, oh, Lunenburg's usually in that top third tier. What happened? And I'm saying, okay. And I happened to call somebody that I know knows school systems really well, and I won't go there. But in any case, I pulled out the MCAS results. And yeah, lo and behold, meeting or exceeding expectations is 46%. 2% of the population exceeds it. 44 barely meet it. The rest don't. And I'm saying, this is a catastrophe. This is reading. This is grades kindergarten through 3. That's what everything is built on. That's what all they're learning. That's all their proficiency. That projects what happens in their lives. And we're satisfied with that number? I know we aren't. I know we aren't. And by the way, I sincerely appreciate The fact that you, when you heard the numbers were going to be bad, you went into an austerity mode. It's too bad we get some bad data. But that caused me to start digging around in the MCAS data. And student-teacher ratio in Lunenburg is 14.9 to 1. I go down the street to Air, it's 12. I go over to Fitchburg, it's 12. So it's not like we're bringing teachers on just to sit them there. We're depriving these kids of opportunities. I heard about some paralegals going away. And I believe that they were in the early phases of learning. This is criminal, what we're letting happen here. So teachers on. Average teacher salaries, we pay them well. We don't overpay them or anything like that. They're in the middle. But per pupil expenditures, we spend $17,684. Let's go over to Acton, $20,006. Let's go to Groton, $20,000. Let's go to Fitchburg, $19,005. We're $2,000 less per pupil than all our local towns. And our kids aren't doing as well. There's something nuts about that. And there's other pieces that the grades 4 through 5, but I won't go into that. But in either case, when folks hear that we did, oh, they didn't spend their money, they're out of control, well, this board did take corrective actions. You really did. And I know you're working really hard to bring everything in line. But the fact of it is, we are going to have to go for an override. Chris, being an old chairman of the finance committee from 100 years ago, when we shut the library, when we shut the library down, yes, we did, folks. You know, we shut down the parks and recreation because we just didn't have enough money. It's not sustainable, and you have to come back and get an override. But all I know is our kids are paying for this because we're not investing in them. And I just wondered, how many paralegals do we have now? Did you say 2? Paraprofessionals.
No, we have.
I mean, I'm sorry.
I don't have that exact number off the top of my head. Chris, do you?
The last time I did an FTE count, I believe it was, or for full-time employees, we were around 242.
Oh, for total.
Total. But I mean, the people that are helping our 3rd graders and 2nd graders read.
Oh,
Yeah.
that might be too.
Yeah, that might be too. I hear where a superintendent is doing that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing of it is, I believe the parents understand the importance of reading to their children. And perhaps we need to be pushing that some more. But there are other energies potentially available to help our kids. All I know is we have to drive up that score. We're just not being fair to our kids. So after all the monies, and I'm glad we're getting a good handle on it, we are going to need more money going in that direction. So that's all I'm going to say, and thank you very much.
Mr. Abbott, I want to make 2 comments in response. Number 1, I think that this town is at a turning point, and this is a moment where we get to define ourselves. Who are we going to be, and what do we want our town to look like? And I think that while we may not all agree on what every priority should be across the town, that's the nature of democracy. But what we know is that we want to live in a town where people have a good quality of life. And one of the greatest minds to ever come from Massachusetts said that the price of civilization, the entry fee for civilization, is taxation. And that has always been true. We are going to need to do an override. The second point I want to make is one that you have impressed upon me at a number of different meetings, but with the speech that you just gave us brings it home. There are only 2 groups of citizens in this country who do not have the right to vote. One are felons and the other are children. And we need to do better for them. If they don't have the right to vote, they don't have the right to put in somebody they care about, then we need to speak on their behalf. And when I joined school committee, Carol Archambault said, "Are you willing to speak for the trees?" And that's what we have to do. We have to get those scores up. We have to earn the public's trust back. If we need to do 10 more forums, I will go to 10 more forums. If I need to sit with the people from the Ledger to do another interview about what happened, I will do that. We cannot give up on these kids because we are the only people that can speak for them. They cannot speak for themselves.
Right. And the override piece, people say, oh my God, the override. I'm not going to be able to afford it. There are other ways to help afford that, go talk to your assessors. There's all sorts of programs that are available to you to help you. Just don't throw the baby out with the bathwater because you don't want the overrides. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions? Anybody have any other comments?
Are we on Zoom as well?
Any
Liz, is
comments
there
on
anybody
Zoom?
online? No.
And if anyone watching later has questions,
I have a question for you afterwards. Please don't leave.
if anyone watching does have questions,
Reference to what this gentleman is talking about. I'm not for an override, okay? I've seen our taxes go up quite a bit in the last, I'm Darrell Plant, 490 Lancaster Ave. More money to the schools at this point, I don't believe is necessary. I've been advocating for this for the last, and I didn't mean to go down this path because I felt like this was more focused discussion, but this gentleman brought it up. There needs to be an ideological shift in the schools. I faced it for 5 years. My kid comes home, and he's doing quite well, and he says to me, I asked him, got any homework? No, I got no homework. How's school going? I'm bored. He says, well, why don't you ask the teacher if you can get some advanced work in math or reading or writing? I already did. She won't give it to me. This is what I'm talking about, okay? What we've done is we've mixed kids in that are low performers with high performers. We sprinkled them out all nice and equal so that all the classes have pretty much the same structure, let's say, and they're being taught at the lowest level because those kids need to be brought up. Meanwhile, the kids that are in the middle and the kids that are at the top aren't getting personal instruction as they should. I've been saying this and pounding the table since I've come to this community. Every single child should be appropriately challenged. And until that ideological change happens, you're not going to get my vote for more money, okay? This whole notion of equity in the schools is a cancer. And I've been fighting this for 5 years, going to all the school committee meetings, talking about it, getting absolutely nowhere. And when I do get my questions answered, it's months later. And then I follow up with a question. So in order to get to the root of where I'd like to get to, it can take 6 months of going to school committee meetings. That's my frustration, okay? So until there's an ideological shift at the top, I don't see, nor would I support an override in this town, because I see a lot of other people out there that are struggling with their taxes overall, okay? And I would like to see other budgets supported in town, like the highway department and stuff, and they're asking for funds. You know, we spent the last 2 years running around to all these departments, scraping up as much as we can to support the schools. All those budgets have been, you know, they've been hurt. So maybe there should be an override, but I wouldn't support one now. Thank you.
Bit of a supportive rebuttal as well. When I came to Lunenburg because we wanted to find, I moved from California out here, and it was essentially where are the best school systems in the area for where I was working. And they came back and said, go to Lunenburg. And so we did. My daughter, in the 3rd grade, we had to pull her out because she wasn't reading. She wasn't getting there. So we went out and employed other opportunities for her. She came back and she's doing beautifully right. Her career and everything's done well. She's learned how to read. We were fortunate that we could do that. And yeah, I appreciate the fact, having been an assessor, that there are a lot of folks that are right at the edge and they're hurting. But at the same time, if they own a home, they're really excited about the appreciation on their homes and such. If you have lousy school systems, the value of your homes will not retain what they could be. So you're trading one for the other. You really are in the schools. But, you know, and by the way, there are other riders. The charter school, in fact, we ended up sending my daughter to a charter school. And that worked out. But not everybody has that ability to do that. And that's why we've got to focus on everybody. And I do agree with you that the kids are limited in terms of how far they can explore because we don't have very many teachers. You look at the ratio and they can barely handle all the things. If we could have a few extra teachers, they would do the advanced sciences. They would do all these other things, but the funds just aren't there. So I'm saying, please consider, folks, that the town needs it no matter what. We're not keeping up with the costs, you know, especially insurance and things like that. But don't hit our kids. Do not, please do not hit the kids. Thank you, sorry.
Thank you.
Nothing else I can say to that. We're all set.
That was a mic drop moment,
Yeah.
Mr. Rabbit.
So, anything else? Yeah, okay. Well, thank you guys again for coming and participating and asking hard questions. All right, thank you.